shad tubes, minnow tubes, soft plastic grubs. Get serious about trout and landlocked king trolling with serious soft plastics from the Fish Hunt Shoot Production store. Oh yeah. I knew if I got something to eat, I'd hook up. Still 80 feet away though. I'm all paranoid. I don't usually stack lines. Of course, I've been fishing in a kayak for 2 years, so there's not a lot of stacking going on. But the last release, I snagged the other line and ended up losing a fish. So this one feels like he's free. So, you know, obviously, it's not a red hot bite this morning, and that's one of the times when the soft plastics, you know, really excel because it feels real, it looks real. They nip at it, fools them pretty well. 25 feet out here. Yeah, that was on one of my grubs. Oh, nice rainbow. Yeah, baby. All right. Nice rainbow for the smoker, and he jumped all over that firecracker grub. Trout rods, salmon rods, striper rods, halibut rods, downrigger rods, lead core rods, spinning rods, and more. If you want a high quality, high performance rod that won't let you down out on the water, go to fishhuntshoot.com and check out our selection of high quality, high performance fishing rods. Howdy folks, Cal Kellogg here. It is a stunningly beautiful day here in the Sierra foothills, but it is a little breezy. I think you can hear me okay, but you might hear some wind noise on that microphone, but I'll project. I think everything will be okay. You know, people have been spending a lot of time around the house these days. They've been watching a lot of YouTube, reading the Fish Sniffer magazine, you know, watching The Walking Dead on Netflix, stuff like that. And as a result, I've been getting a bunch of questions. So I'm going to answer some of those questions this week and going into next week. First up, question by Russ Gomez, and he asked me to explain the differences between tubes, like that shad tube right there, and grubs, like that 3-inch firecracker grub right there. Let me show you these close up. There's the firecracker grub right there. There's a shad tube right there. And here's one of my minnow tubes right here. So, you know, the biggest difference between grubs and tubes, I think, is the fact that grubs, they have that swim tail. They have built-in action. Here's one of my little tiny 2-inch grubs. They have that built-in action. That tail, it swims, it vibrates. If you got a flake model grub like those, it puts out flash. It looks alive. It looks like a minnow, or it looks like an insect. So the grub, long story short, it has built-in action. When you get to your tubes, whether you're talking about a shad tube, a minnow tube, a hoochie, something like that, they have very little built-in action. So whenever you're fishing a tube, you want to team it with some sort of blade, whether you go for a UV sling blade like that, one of my fisheye dodgers like that. You want to team these with some sort of blade, and typical rule of thumb, you want to put your tube or hoochie about 2 to 2.5 blade lengths behind the blade. If you're running a 6-inch blade like these, that is about 14 inches. And I've said this many times on the channel, the proper action for a tube, you want it to surge forward and stop for a moment as that blade kicks. And what you really are trying to replicate for optimum results is the same action you get when you see a Bass Pro walk the dog with a Zara spook. It darts and stops. It darts and stops. Darts and stops. And that little stop, that little hesitation, that trigger strikes. So try to get your tube or your hoochie that distance behind the blade that when you run it through the water, you're getting that kind of a little bit of pause as that blade kicks that action back through the leader to the tube or to the hoochie. And that's what I found best. Now, in terms of when to use tubes, you know, I always use them at lakes that feature schooling bait. whether it's pond smelt or threadfin shad, places like Oroville, Shasta, Folsom, Don Pedro. Big open water impoundments that have schools of bait. The fish are used to hearing other fish feed on bait. The dodger, the thumps of the dodger and the flash, it pulls the fish in, and then they see that tube or that hoochie acting crippled near that blade, and they jump all over it. And finally, not only do I like to use Procure with my hoochies and tubes, minnow tubes, shad tubes, and whatnot, I also like to tip the hook with a little piece of meat. Typically a little piece of anchovy skin. It works for trout, it works great for kings, and I don't know what it is. Anchovies, even though they're a saltwater fish, an anchovy, that's your kind of your bait fish equivalent of a worm. It seems like everything likes them. Trout like them, salmon like them. I've caught kokanee on tubes that are tipped with a little piece of anchovy skin. And you know, on and on from there. Catfish like them. Everything likes anchovies. Everything likes night crawlers. So just good rule of thumb, I like to tip my tubes or my hoochies with a little piece of anchovy, and I feel that just helps close the deal, and that's triply important when you're dealing with kings. Kings are notorious missers, they're nippers, and if they come in, they get a little taste of real meat when they go after that tube the first or second time, it really helps to close the deal. So tubes, team them with dodgers, and you know, get that kind of walk the dog action going on, tip them, lube them up with scent, fish them in and around schools of bait, and they work very well. They are a great minnow imitation. So now your grubs are a little bit different. You can team your grubs with flashers, you can team your grubs with dodgers, or you can fish your grubs naked. I really like to team them with either flashers or fish them naked. Up at Eagle Lake, the tried and true method is just running a grub at about 1 mile an hour, just fishing it real slow, no blades, no flashers, no nothing, just the grub, just swimming it through the water column. It works very good. At baitfish lakes, I found that teaming a grub with flashers worked great. Last September, you saw me do a video up at Shasta where I caught a couple nice rainbows. One was about 4 pounds on one of my firecracker grubs, just like that one there, teamed with some of the Max Lure Hot Wing flashers. Actually, that set of Hot Wings I was running, I had removed one of the blades, so I was just running a single blade. The bite was a little off, the fish were kind of mixed in with bait, and I was looking for something subtle and slow that had a lot of action that would stay in the strike zone for an extended period of time. I tried blades and tubes that day, nothing. But I found that with the grubs, I could get hit. I could get a little bit of action, save the day, and we ultimately ended up with some pretty good footage on that trip. But you know, if I had to really peg, you know, a percentage of the time that I'm using blades with a grub, I would say maybe 20% of the time. Most of the time, I'm going really subtle. I'm relying just on the grub's tail to induce the strikes. I remember one of the reasons, you know, you always have to team your grubs with a good trolling swivel, because these things, not only does the tail work, if you look at a grub, the tail all lies to one side of the bait. And when you troll that through the water, the fact that the tail's on one side of the bait makes it rotate. Now, to my eye, I've always thought, man, they look kind of silly. I gotta be honest, they look kind of silly rotating through the water, but that actually adds to the presentation. And if you look back through the channel here, you know you got time on your hands. Look back through the channel here, and I actually have a rigging video of me showing how to rig these on an up-eye hook. So not only is it swimming and kind of rolling through the water, you're actually getting a little bit of a back and forth motion on the grub. It takes some trial and error to get a grub to swim like that, but once you've got the hook bent properly, or you're using the proper hook, you've got the proper setup, it can be absolutely dynamite, and you will get way more strikes on a grub that will wander back and forth as well as roll and swim through the water column. I'll use a grub in a bait fish lake, as I said. I'll use them in the high Sierras. I'll use them at bug lakes. When I'm using tubes, I really like to match the hatch. I like to go with those bait fish themed colors. all white and silver, dark over light. You know, I just like to stay in that kind of match the bait fish hatch kind of mode. Grubs, you know, if I'm at a big bait fish lake, Lake Shasta, you know, I'm going to run something bait fish colored, you know, or at least I'm going to start off with that, something, you know, like this firecracker or a, you know, a silver flake clear or a smoke colored grub, something like that. I might even go with one of my light pink grubs, but just something in a bait fish theme. Now at a bug lake or up in the high Sierras, I'll use a little bit bolder colors. I'll use your reds, I'll use your bright colors. And if, like I was up at Lake Davis this last fall, the fish were feeding on some sort of insect. So I actually put on a grub this size, a small grub, but it was my insect, my larva colored grub, basically a rich olive green. And while it wasn't an exact match for the insects that the trout were feeding on, it was close enough that I drew some strikes. And if I remember correctly, I landed one fish up to that was about 3 pounds on just a tiny little naked grub like that, just trolling along very slow, right under some wind chop. And it had choppy surface. Can't remember how deep I was fishing, but the fish were actively feeding on insects, and a slow trolled grub closed the deal. And you know, I had been failing to catch fish on flies and my big flies, spoons, stuff like that, but the grub got it done, saved the day. And that's another point. You know, if I'm at Oroville, say, and I'm targeting kings, I'll start the day out with blades, tubes, shad tubes, minnow tubes, stuff like that. Most of the time, however, I'm not starting off the day with the soft plastics. You know, I'm starting off with those aggressive tactics. I'm working through the speed range, and you know, both tubes and grubs, they're in that mix, but they're not necessarily my first choice to start off the day. The exception is when I'm targeting king salmon, landlocked king salmon. But on an average day at an average trout lake, I'm usually starting off with plugs and spoons fast. Then I'm kind of working down through the speed range, and I'm downsizing my baits until I locate fish, or I locate feeding fish, or I start catching fish. That's the basic philosophy. We've talked about that a lot here on the channel. And you know, that's pretty much it. I'll start off with the blades, then maybe transition to some flies, stuff like that. In that kind of situation, the soft plastics, they're kind of right there with gulp and natural bait. They're a slower, more realistic presentation. If the trout or the salmon, you know, they aren't hitting well, but particularly the trout, you know, a soft grub like that, put a ton of Procure on it, they come in, it feels real. They get it in their mouth, and it's fish on. You're hooked up with them. So that's how I use grubs and tubes. Your mileage may vary, but I think that's a pretty solid foundation on how you might go about using them. Man, I've caught some tremendous fish on tubes. I've caught some tremendous fish on hoochies, and I've caught some very nice fish on grubs as well. Definitely some lures that you need in your tackle box. Some of those presentations that you need in your arsenal. You might not use them every day. You might not use them every trip, every week, every month. But in certain situations, you absolutely have to have those baits in your box, and you can go from 0 to hero very quickly when you get on a hot tube bite or a hot grub bite when the fish have been ignoring spoons or plugs or whatever else you might have tried. So that's it. That's my mileage, man. Get out there, experiment. When we get back to fishing, play with some different presentations and figure out what works, what meshes with your style of fishing. But remember the fish scent, and remember, you know, fish situationally. Always have a strategy when you hit the water, and by all means, incorporate the soft plastic baits into your overall strategy throughout the course of the season, and you're going to go a long way to catching, you know, more and bigger trout and salmon. Anyhow, I'm Kel Kellogg. If you're looking for any kind of trout and salmon tackle, rods, reels, soft baits, grub kits, tube kits, speed spoons, whatever, you know where to go. Go over to the Fish Hunt Shoot Productions website and check out the Fish Hunt Shoot store. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for the question, Russ. I will be catching you guys here later. I'll be out here in my backyard filming away, trying to pass on some fishing information, or just some stuff to make you guys think about, you know, what's going on the fishing scene and how you might, you know, adapt your strategies to catch more and bigger fish in different situations. So anyhow, that's all I got to say. I'm kind of rambling here. I have to get back in the house now. I got some typing to do, so I will catch you next time right here on YouTube, guys. Thank you for all the support. 3.1 million views, going on 11,000 subscribers right now. None of this would have been possible without you guys, the support from our viewers. You guys are all family out there in YouTube land. We very much appreciate it, guys. I'm Kel Kellogg. You have a good, safe day. Thank you. FishHuntShoot.com offers a variety of tackle as well as rods and reels designed to get you on more and bigger fish. Check it out today at FishHuntShoot.com.